The Pied Piper of Hamelin. Long ago, in a small town called Hamelin, there came a season when the streets grew restless. At first, the people noticed only a few rats along the riverbanks. They scurried between stones and slipped into cellars. No one paid them much attention. But as the weeks passed, more appeared. They crept through market stalls. They rustled in cupboards. They gathered beneath floorboards and behind walls. Soon they were everywhere. The bakers found gnawed loaves upon their shelves. The millers heard scratching in the grain stores. Even the town hall did not remain untouched. The people of Hamelin tried many things. They set traps along the streets. They kept cats in their houses. They closed doors and sealed windows. But the rats only multiplied. They ran along the river in dark ribbons. They filled the alleyways at dusk. At night, their small feet whispered across the rooftops. At last, the townspeople gathered in the hall to speak of what could be done. The mayor stood before them with folded hands. "We must find help," he said. But help did not come from another town. It arrived one quiet morning, walking through the gate. The stranger wore a long coat of many colours, greens and blues, yellows and reds. Each thread seemed to catch the light as he moved. At his side hung a slender pipe. The stranger walked calmly through the market square until he reached the town hall. There he knocked once upon the door. When the mayor asked his business, the stranger spoke plainly. "I have heard of your trouble," he said. "I can lead the rats away from Hamelin." The mayor leaned forward. "You can?" The stranger nodded. "I ask only a small payment," he said, naming a sum of gold. The townspeople murmured among themselves. The mayor considered the matter. "If you rid us of the rats," he said at last, "you shall have your payment." The stranger inclined his head. Without further words, he stepped back into the street. He raised the pipe to his lips and he began to play. The sound was not loud. It was a clear, wandering melody, soft at first, but steady. The notes drifted through the town like a thread carried on the wind. And then something curious happened. From the cellars came movement. From the alleys came rustling. From the grain stores and kitchens and dark corners beneath the stairs, the rats emerged. They paused only briefly, then they began to follow. One by one, and then in long streams, they gathered behind the piper. He walked slowly through the streets. The melody continued without hurry. Rats poured from doorways. They climbed down walls. They spilled into the road like shadows. The people watched from windows and rooftops. No one spoke. The piper led the growing tide of rats through the town gates, down the winding path, toward the river. The water moved quietly that morning. The piper stepped into the shallows without breaking the melody. The rats followed him. First, the small ones, then the larger ones, then the countless others that had filled the town. The water closed around them. The current carried them away, and the river grew still again. The piper lowered his pipe. Without looking back, he walked calmly toward the town. The people of Hamelin greeted him with relief. Their streets were quiet once more. The scratching had stopped. The whispering feet were gone. The stranger returned to the hall and stood before the mayor. "My work is finished," he said. The mayor shifted in his chair. "Yes," he replied. But now that the rats had vanished, the gold seemed suddenly heavier. "Surely," he said slowly, "the task was not so difficult." The councillors nodded beside him. Perhaps a smaller payment would be more fitting. The stranger watched them for a moment. His face did not change. "I kept my word," he said. The mayor folded his arms. "And we are grateful," he replied. "But the town cannot give so much for so simple a tune." The stranger said nothing more. He stepped outside into the quiet square. For a moment he looked toward the hills beyond Hamelin. Then he raised the pipe again. This time the melody was different. Lighter, brighter. It danced through the air like sunlight over water. From every house and lane, the children heard it. They paused in their games. They stepped into the streets. They followed the music, laughing, skipping, moving in a gentle line behind the piper. The townspeople called after them, but the melody carried the children onward, through the gate, across the fields, toward the distant hills. The path curved between two tall rocks. The piper passed through, the children followed, and then they were gone. The music faded among the hills. The people of Hamelin stood in silence. The wind moved softly through the empty streets. From that day forward, the town remembered the quiet stranger who had come with his pipe, and they remembered the promise they had made. For some debts are not measured in gold, and some songs once played cannot be called back.